Be strong.
Welcome to another FinPlus video. In today's video, we're going to talk about inflation, some of the causes, and also some of the consequences of the phenomenon. So the other day, I was walking to KFC. But before I get into that, it's really essential to remember that this example does not apply to the current coronavirus situation. So when I got there, I checked their menu, right? And it's a very typical menu. You have your fries, you have different kinds of burgers. Of course, you have different kinds of KFC meals. But when I actually looked into one of the prices, right? I saw that the price of the meal was 100 rupees, okay? Nothing too strange. But it was crossed out and it said 150 rupees. So as time actually progresses, the same price of this meal was actually increasing, right? It was 100 at the beginning, then became 150, then 200 rupees, and sort of so on. It keeps on going on, it just keeps on increasing. So what do we actually notice here? We actually can say that prices are increasing, right? And what do we call this? That's inflation. I'm sure you've heard of this term. And to better understand this term, let's actually see, how can we define inflation exactly? So the definition of inflation is pretty simple if we break it down, right? Inflation is an increase in the general price levels, in general price level of goods and services over a time period such as 1 year, it could be 2 years, it could be a decade. It really depends on our reference point of the 2 years we're sort of taking our prices in, so we can actually analyze the change in price. So the previous example we just looked at, right? It was a consequence of inflation, and more specifically, we actually give this consequence a term, and it's called the menu cost. Again, the reason why I introduced this particular consequence is because it really sort of impacts our daily lives. It's a very direct example, and it really sort of instigates us to think about, right? What are the causes of inflation if it happens at such a large extent in our daily lives, right? We should know the causes. So in order to explain these causes, right, let's actually take another example. And this example is going to have a quirky name. I'm going to call it Ravi's Pen Company. I think that this example will sort of serve to illustrate the concept of inflation. So let's say Ravi's Pen Company produces 5 pens a day. Okay, and we can sort of illustrate this. Okay, so we have 5 pens now, and these pens are distributed. They're distributed to a set of consumers, and let's say these consumers are students, okay? Myself, right? Maybe you guys, right? So you can say students, and for now, let's say there are 4 students, okay? 4 students, there are 5 pens, and there are 4 students, okay? So we can actually assume that 1 pen is left over. And let's say this is like a day 1 scenario. Now, moving on to day 2. Okay, Ravi's Pen Company doesn't change the amount of pens they produce. They're still producing 5 pens. Okay, now these are they're distributed, and of course these are distributed through a store channel or whatever. But exams are on now. Okay, let's just take this scenario. The exams are on. And all of a sudden, those same 4 people no longer demand those pens. Now we have me, we have you guys, right? But we actually have a lot more people. Okay, so for the sake of this example, let's say there are about 9 people. Okay, wonderful. So in our previous scenario, day one, we had 4 people buying 5 pence. Now we have 9 people buying 5 pence. Now you must be thinking, right? If there are 9 people, it's quite obvious that each person doesn't receive a pen. And that's kind of an issue, right? You don't really want things to be underprovided, right? So they're not enough for, let's use economic terminology, for the increase in demand for these pens. Because we had 4 people initially, and now we have 9 because exams are on, and all of a sudden a lot more people need these pens. Now, this actually motivates businesses to implement, let's coin a term here, a price barrier. Okay, so now what exactly do I mean by a price barrier? So now, in essence, the idea behind a price barrier, just a second, is that if businesses increase the price of their goods, lesser people will actually buy them, right? A higher price sort of discourages people from buying a certain good because it's more expensive now. It sort of allows businesses to continue producing the same amount because all of a sudden that same 5 pence, whose demand was like 9 people, has sort of decreased because they've increased the price of those pens. And this also puts the business in a position to actually incur a higher profit as well, because they're charging a higher price, but they're actually supplying the same amount. But what if multiple businesses increase their price? Now, I've just given the example of Ravi's Pen Company, but what if multiple businesses like Ravi's Pen Company actually increase their prices because there's an overall increase in demand for their services, right? The demand for pens is increasing. Let's say the demand for vegetables increases, demand for dairy products increases, right? You can actually see there's a nationwide increase in price, and this is exactly what inflation is. It's more of a collective increase in price. It's not just one business. KFC is increasing it, food vendors are increasing it, this pen company is, right? So a higher demand for pens kind of leads to a higher price for pens. And likewise, a higher demand for KFC, like we explored earlier, leads to a higher price for KFC's products. So now let's sort of, these pens and products, KFC products, along with multiple businesses sort of doing the same thing, increasing their price, leads to inflation. So this is actually a phenomenon that's being demonstrated consistently, in our Indian economy and in the world as well. And this is actually only one type of inflation. This is what we call demand pull inflation. But next time, we're actually going to talk about another type of inflation and maybe even look at some applications of these inflations, such as hyperinflation. And I think that's about it. So stay tuned for the next video. Like and subscribe. We'll see you next time.